What I want to show you today is an app that I was building as one of these take-home assignments. It is using public API from Rijksmuseum. That's how they call it here in the Netherlands. And it is museum about art. The idea is that I implemented this with like only Android side. Tech stack was like I use Coin, Retrofit, Coil for image loading, and basically that's it. However, they mentioned a screening that they are using Ktor because they're using Kotlin multi-platform, and I decided to also implement this like in a separate branch, migrate from Retrofit to Ktor, so I can show how the process would go if I am about to do a migration, which is something that bring me plus points, but it was also a learning experience for me because like I wanted to see in details how I would come up with the contract tests when they are with Ktor capabilities rather than Retrofit, which I'm pretty much used to, which was a really good experience, and that's what I want to show you today. Um, as of something that maybe like as on a side note about the interview that you may pay attention to, the company where I was presenting this is a company that is strong on marketing. So they are doing a lot of marketing throughout the app, which means presentation of the UI is very important for them. Like lesson learned was that if you go to a company that, for example, I don't know, does a lot of marketing, then UI is very important. But if it's a company that does something else, maybe something else is more important. So in implementing take-home assignments, it is very important to pay attention on what the company would maybe value more. Um, so they ask questions like, for example, if okay, so if you had more time, what you would change in this, or taking in consideration this marketing perspective. So my answer was, and by the way, I got an offer. Like they said everything went well. Tomorrow they're gonna send me the offer, but the answers what I gave, I would still like to share with you. So for example, probably I would have created this as a grid, and it would have been staggered grid because these images they're having different dimensions. Not all of them are horizontal. So I could have. I mean, the API provides two types of images. One is a web image, which is this horizontal banner, and then there is this other one, which is a web image, which is a full size image. So yeah, I said I will do that, and then also like here probably I'll do some differences between the cropping, because it depends what's most important for the business. I would communicate that with whoever is in charge how we are going to approach. And like you see, this is cut off on the top because I use crop for the image, but the actual size is okay because I calculate the aspect ratio. The API returns back the aspect ratio and I calculated, so the aspect ratio is okay. The cropping should have been different than the crop, that type. So that's basically my answer, what I answered. And other than that, yeah, I just said like I completely missed the risk pagination, but I explained how I would implement this if I had to do the pagination and how I would test it as well, which is good. So that's basically what they asked. And yeah, I talked about different points in the implementation as well. What I would do differently. For example, I would introduce here. I just use the theme that comes in from like when you just create a new project. If I had more time, I would introduce custom theme, blah blah blah, all those things, and design system. All right. Talking about the implementation, so let's actually first look into, is the code visible, or maybe I should make it bigger. 125 should be big enough. So the network, so basically this is not modularized. That was also part of the thing. Like I explained myself when I started presenting this solution, is like I started minimalistic because the app is small. There was no, like, I'm working alone, there is no need to modularize it. If in a long term I know that there will be multiple teams working on these, like different features, whatever, probably we are going to start modularizing, especially given that we want to share code across platforms. We want to write screenshot tests. There are limitations when you don't have modularization. So in that sense, probably I would have gone with modularized setup, which was really good answer. So Here, just to get started, this is the API is in Retrofit. So let me maybe sync. So it's gonna compile because I was changing between the branches. Um, and I think we are gonna focus on a network for today. I think that's how everything went with the migration to Ktor, which is the most important part, I guess. So here I have this API. This API, like it has just two GET calls. Apparently, I didn't do the pagination, but like they are gonna be just additional queries here, like this page or that page. This one takes list of artworks. This one is taking the details of particular artwork by taking the object number that comes here in the response. So it like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I haven't done pagination in Compose before. So, what would be the approach if you had to do it? Like, do we need an extra library or just with Compose we can do it?
That is excellent question. Thanks for asking this. They also
Yeah.
asked me how would you do the pagination. So there
Mm-hmm.
are two approaches. One is using the pagination library from Google, like this paging tree or whatever. In my experience, it works like depending on what you are doing. If it's like simple thing that you need to do pagination, go for it. Fine. If you need some complex setup, so for example, in particular, what we had separate header that was loaded from different API. Then we had list items based on that header that were loaded from separate API. And between these, on specific positions, we had ads that were from yet another API. So you have three APIs, you have to split these things. The pagination, the paging library worked more against us than for us. This was complete mess, like barely doable anything. Now, I would like in that situation, like we just actually I did that refactoring. I completely removed the library for that particular screen. I did pagination pure compose, and everything was working just fine. Now, how would you do that? In Compose, I'm gonna show you an example. What you can do is you can observe the scroll of the list, and you can say, okay, if the visible item, like the last visible item, is like 3 closer to the end, or like how many, like you can define the offset, how many items how many items close to the end of the list, you can request a new call. And basically from the compose side, you're just making this event. Then in the view model, when it comes, it says like load next page. And based on what pagination you have on the backend, you are gonna like issue the new call. It could be the pagination could be based on dates. It could be based on pointers. It could be based on page IDs. Depends. So that's something that you'll have to manage. But the trigger is very simple. It's very easy to do. So that's also what I explained to them. And like while talking about it, they were like, because they probably saw the pain of the paging library as well. Because I'm assuming they are having it's an app that is basically doing a lot of marketing. I would assume they're having some ads inside and they are managing different things in the lists. So yeah, I can imagine they saw the pain. Um, so yeah, this is the responses. Essentially, these two are the main. Like this is for the list; it returns a list. This one returns one object, but the object is the same. So like I decided to parse out this object. What is important here, as I mentioned, there is web image, which is the full blown image. There is the header image, and this one is that horizontal image. And yeah, this is just what comes in from the backend that I decided to parse out. And that's it basically. And there is one, I decided to make an out interceptor for this. We have to supply key to each request. Now there are different techniques to do that. Basically, you can hard code it in each and every call. You can, I'm not sure if you can make it part of the base URL. I don't think you can do that. But yeah, this is like, I made this in order to show that I can actually write tests for this, one. And second, that I can introduce, like by using interceptors, we are introducing more flexibility. Here is one key element here. Hard coding the key like that here is not okay from security perspective. So what are the options? Like if you are in a situation where you have to explain yourself about particular solution, talk about the alternatives, which is something that I did as well. So why this is problematic? So it is an option, but explain why it is problematic and what are the alternatives. Now, what are my alternatives here? So like hard coding it here is not okay because it goes to the repository. Somebody can find it if they have access to the repository. Now, what are my alternatives is like to keep this value in something that is git ignored only locally. Like for example, in this file, I can put it and then load it through the build config into my build. And then here, I can access it through my build config. I guess build config, or yeah, I have to enable that in the build.gradle. However, is that more secure? Well, it's secure if somebody looks at the code, they wouldn't see it in the repository. But if the application gets compiled, this is not going to be referenced. It is being, during the compilation time, replaced. Like this is the value that has to go here. It's going to put that value, make a compilation. Somebody takes the APK, unpacks it, reverse engineers it, and finds it. Right? So that's also not secure. What if I put it in Git, in GitHub, in the secrets? Well, the same story. It gets compiled, so somebody can reverse engineer the code and find it. The most secure would be if I store this on a, let's say, on a backend somewhere. Then when the application loads, I make a call to get this and then use it forward. Something that we do, for example, if you're having any application which has authorization, you make a login, you get token, then you use that token further. Now, if that comes from a backend and if it's constant, then like you can still store it securely afterwards on Android by using different security libraries or different storing mechanisms. That's different point. But like having it like this is not okay. So that's also something that you pay attention to. And yeah, basically in the network module we have the interceptor. Okay, HTTP. Go ahead, Nitesh. Yeah, go ahead. You have raised your,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I have a question about security, app
Mm-hmm.
security.
Mm-hmm.
So you told me something like upload the app, then get the data from backend. That is the app security.
The,
So reverse engineer, they can't get the our sensitive data.
yeah, I was talking particularly about this key. So like if it lives on a backend and if I get it while the application loads and then use it onwards, that would be more secure compared to having it hard coded like this in the code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Okay. So yeah, so pretty clear setup here. Interceptor as a singleton, okay, HTTP as a singleton, adding the interceptor in there, and then just building the base URL and converter factory. Cool. And then making an instance by using that retrofit from the museum API, and I'm pretty good to go. Now, what if I want, like, how did I convert this to Ktor? So I started off by replacing retrofit dependencies with Ktor dependencies, and maybe we can go through the pull request, but I think it's not going to be as interesting. I would rather check out that branch and then go through the code if you don't mind. But like this code, I would share that. This code is public, and I shared all this in the pro as well. So in the pro, I also dropped the link in the post. You can the pro members, you can also go there and find more. But basically, I'm gonna drop the link because it's open source repo. You can access it. I'm gonna drop the link here in the chat. What you can do is if you go to the branches, check out the refactoring Ktor, and this is the commit, and basically all the changes are here. And they're pretty small changes, but let me walk you through what I had to do in order to make it work with as little refactoring as possible. So I'm gonna check out here. and sync it. So it's gonna build. And again, I can start from this, from the network module. Now, like how Ktor works, like the difference between Retrofit and Ktor is in the following. Retrofit is like if we can judge the library's customizability by low, medium, and high. Retrofit is somewhere in the medium or medium to high, between medium and high. So it's like highly custom. It is customizable. Um, it is very simple, very easy, very like flat learning curve, but it is not supporting multi-platform. That's like the negative side. And yeah, basically you can use it for JVM. An additional thing is like, yeah, go ahead, Shafak.
Here is content negotiation. What is the scope here?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that just in a bit.
Okay.
Additional thing is that you probably know Marcin Moskalas. I don't know his how to pronounce his name, but he's like sharing lots of things about Kotlin and libraries around Kotlin. He did a benchmarking and he shared that Retrofit in general uses more threads compared to Ktor for making I/O operations. So that might be something that you can take in consideration. On the other hand, we have Ktor, which is like highly customizable, but it is a little bit more complex to learn how to use. And that's why here I don't know everything in details, but basically we have to create HTTP client. And then when we create HTTP client, we have to, that's how we make calls. We use HTTP client instance to make calls. Then here we have to supply engine, which engine we are going to use. In this case, I use Android, but it could be something else too. Like the engine can be mock, as we are going to see in the tests. And this Android comes from like additional library they provide, which is client engine Android. So it is basically for JVM on Android. If it's if you need something like multi-platform, probably you're going to use different engine. Then we have to install some plugins and set up some defaults. So for example, if you want to use JSON for communication, because Ktor can work with different standards. Like it doesn't have to be JSON, it can be XML, it can be RPC, it could be, yeah, I don't know what are the other things that you can use. If you want to use JSON, you have to install like this content negotiation basically is what we have in Retrofit as like a converter factory. You can like it's similar to that. So we have to install the content negotiation, then we have to supply in there what's the standard that we are going to use. In this case, I use JSON. And basically, this is the exact same thing that you would apply if you are having in Retrofit when you're, or OKHTTP when you're applying the
JSON converter factory.
yeah, the JSON converter factory. What's cool about this is that like Ktor also can take in OKHTTP. So like if you have OKHTTP, you can use that one and all the setup around OKHTTP with like interceptors or everything, you can just use that one here as well, if you decide to. However, I decided to go this way because like if I'm aiming to push more towards Kotlin multi-platform, I want to use less of these JVM things. And also that's why here I am also hard coding, like I don't have interceptor. Ktor doesn't have interceptors for that. And I didn't find what would be the alternative because all the examples on internet saying like you can still use interceptors by using OKHTTP. So like I could have used the interceptor still, but like here I'm just hard coding in the parameters. So in all the requests, that's why we use this default request. In all requests, this is gonna be the base URL, and every time on the URL I'm gonna append key and value. What is gonna be the key and the value? So what this is going to do, essentially, on whatever I have here additional, at the end it's gonna add question mark, and then it will take this equals this. So this is what's gonna happen.
Okay. query parameter.
Yes, query parameter, exactly. So I like, you see, from that perspective, from learning perspective, or learning curve, this is not like it's parameter, like parameters append, but essentially this is query argument, query parameter. And in that sense, retrofit is much cleaner in the naming because it's query parameter. And here it is like parameters append. It is not clear how do you add query, because maybe somebody can perceive this line as if here adding slash key slash whatever the other value is. So it's not very clear how it is going to end up being. Anyway, so that's one. I defined the HTTP client. Now, how do I use the HTTP client? The Museum API, which was an interface in Retrofit, because Retrofit creates the implementation for you. Here, you have to create the implementation. So this turned into a class. And the class takes now the HTTP client that we have just defined, so we can make calls by using this HTTP client. Now, the same functions are overridden. The same functions are not overridden, but like the same exist, but the implementation is here now because this was an interface before. And the implementation is like, okay, HTTP client get and the same link that was in the interface for Retrofit, it is here as well. However, one difference is that in Retrofit, if the response is 400 or up, it's gonna give you an HTTP exception, and inside this HTTP exception, you can get values like the error code and bunch of other things. Ktor, I like from what I experienced, doesn't have this HTTP exception. It has different exceptions. But when the error is 400 and up, it is not throwing an exception on you. Rather, it is giving you here just response and a status code, and then you have to figure out if it was an error or not on yourself. And that's exactly what I have done here. I have introduced my own HTTP exception. This is only to reduce the refactoring. So bear with me now. I'm going to explain why I created the exception and what could I have done differently. So I created my own HTTP exception that will take status code and it's just throwable, nothing else, like simple class. And I put it in my network. So it's going to stay there. If this was ended up in a module, this would be some private somewhere. It wouldn't be exposed. So like here, what I do is if the response status is okay, cool. Otherwise, so maybe this wasn't the best approach. Maybe I should have done something like if the response status is higher or equal to 400, or what is the 400 alternative? So it is a bad request, I guess. So bad request.
Yeah,
is,
bad.
Yeah, 400.
Or 400.
Yeah, maybe I should have done it this way. Right? Makes sense.
We can create a sealed class for the exceptions.
Exactly. So that's what I wanted to share next. But for now, what I ended up doing is like, okay, if I'm okay, give me the response body, which is gonna automatically convert using the serialization library. It uses the same serialization library to artwork response, which is basically this one. That was also for the retrofit. Otherwise, throw this exception and give me the response code, which is again in this response as a status, and then value is the code, because status is like enum type or something here. Yeah, HTTP status code, and it has all the values inside. So I'm parsing out the value. And I've done the same for this call. Again, this is only to reduce the refactoring. What else I could have done? I could have introduced different type, as Abi just mentioned. And instead of having this exception, I could have encapsulated that. Even I didn't have to make a new type. I could have encapsulated here right away in the artwork details response, because this response, maybe I could have made a sealed type to have this response or whatever error. That's also another approach to do it. Cool. Now, this Museum API is still injected in the repository the same. So everything works the same. So I really made everything to the bare minimum in terms of refactoring. So from the perspective of of the repository that was using this, which is remote repository. So it was injecting Museum API before, it is injecting Museum API now as well. And what it was doing, it was just making a call to fetch whatever. And if it fails because of HTTP exception, which is translated from backend exception, I'm gonna create backend exception or backend, like that sort of result to be delivered back. And this is a sealed type. So the only
Okay,
thing that
so
I had to change here was the import. This HTTP exception was retrofit first. Now it is my own exception,
our yeah.
essentially. And everything else is just working okay. And yeah, so that was the migration. Very simple, very, very straightforward. I would assume in a more complex API, probably I'll have to do a bit more work. But like it ended up being minimalistic and the application just works perfectly fine and even more performant maybe. I don't know. Oops. No. Stop. Please stop. I want to deploy it here. Okay. Let's try. Go ahead, Shafak.
Yeah, what is this offline error type in the artwork result?
Yeah. So the result is my domain result, which is sealed type. For let's say
Yes.
I have in the first screen I have artworks result, and it could be
Mm-hmm.
either a list of data, it could be of like some sort of backend error, or I could be offline. So those are just objects, data objects, pretty simple, that are gonna represent this particular thing. Now it depends how granular you wanna go with the errors. So if you want to
Okay.
represent different backend errors, let's say like I don't know, credentials invalid,
Mm-hmm.
bad request or whatever, probably you can go deeper with this sealed type. So you can like create this in a way that it's gonna be also like sealed class that will be also subtype of this. But here you can do something like object data object. I don't know, bad request. That's gonna be error loading artworks. Then you can have data object. Let's say bad credentials, error loading. So you got the point. You can go as granular as you want, and then you have to parse this out back in your view model. But you in your view model, you are gonna get this type, and you have like this is your domain type. So in your view model, you are talking or dealing with your domain types rather than exceptions that are belonging to completely different layer, architectural layer.
Mm-hmm.
So like your UI-ish layer where your view model exists is talking to your domain, and your domain provides types to it. So it deals with those types of your domain because your UI knows about your domain. Then your domain knows about your networking or whatever you have, like lower level, but that lower level doesn't know about the levels above it, if that makes sense.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah. Nice.
Cool.
Cool.
And yeah, what else? Yeah, so yeah, here the changes ended up being very minimalistic. We saw this running, which
So
is also cool.
I want to ask question.
Yeah.
So can we use flow in this for handling different types of like state loading, error, or successful?
Yes. Yeah, we could do that pretty easily. So like instead of having a suspending function, it can be a flow of something. However,
Yeah.
like when I have one-time calls, I prefer to use this sort of suspending function rather than a flow. But when I have an
Okay.
API that produces more results, like let's imagine, for example, location loading, so it changes over time, then having a flow makes more sense. However, I don't see any problem to convert this into a flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why you created artworks instead of you can also create a generic one to handle
You mean
different types?
artwork result?
Yeah,
Yeah,
instead of we can use also generic and pass the type of the class we want.
for sure. for sure. But then, in my experience, it's gonna like the complexity is gonna only grow as the project grows. So like, yeah, you can have one generic type, and you can have these like generics inside it. Yeah, depending on the project, it works okay. But I'm just like trying to stick to minimalistic things, and also like if I have to change only this one, I don't want to change everything because of that. You know what I mean? So if I want to accommodate something new in one of the future calls, I don't want to change the generic because it's going to propagate changes everywhere. But yeah, I think it's going to work. Like you can have generic one where you can have like, let's say, success and error. Yeah, it would work fine. What else did I want to say? What has changed here?
Um, can you show the mapper for changing the domain data
Oh yeah,
model to domain?
so it's just an extension function here. So I'm keeping it here. What I can easily
Yeah.
do, like if I go here and change this to here to run my tests. Let's make sure that everything's. Oh yeah, I wanted to show the contract test. Okay. I think some sync issues or something like that. I wanted to show you the tests. Yeah, indeed. So here I had a contract test that makes sure that both in-memory implementation and the implementation that talks to backend are working the same. And actually, I only had to change the one that is talking to a backend. So load, yeah, this one. And it turned out I ended up with a simpler implementation here compared to what I had with Retrofit. So in both cases, I use mock web server, and here, like Ktor has its own implementation of a mock web server, but what's the idea is that you can sort of for each and every call, you can mock a response that's going to be returned back. And here in this situation, I don't have too many. I have like responses for list or details, and then I have situations like what if I'm offline or whatever. So what I had to do is create an mock engine. So if you go back to the explanation when we started this, when creating HTTP client, we have to provide an engine. Here, if you go back, I'm providing Android for the production. For the tests, there is this mock engine. And what this mock engine allows you to do is it gives you a request, and then based on this request, you can construct a response. So what I do here is I take in the request, then I create a response body based on that request and the data that comes in. And then I just respond with whatever comes out of this response for. And what that function does is it takes in the request and it checks if it's artworks request, which is the initial, the list. It creates response data with status code OK, and then it creates JSON. Basically, this one will convert artworks into JSON array. So JSON representation that will be returned back. Otherwise, if it's the details call, then it's gonna again create JSON, but now from the details. But first it will try to find a match in the list. So in this request, we are getting the object number. It comes in as an argument. So if I go to the API, so here it comes the object number, which is the variable. So we can parse that out here. And we can say, okay, the object number is my URL's last argument. Then I'm gonna find a matching artwork from the list. And then if the match is not null, then I'm gonna respond with okay, and then convert that to JSON, otherwise not found. and nothing as a content. Otherwise, if none of these calls, I'm just gonna say not found. I mean, it can be anything. So that's for the success cases. And then I have what happens when the backend is unavailable. In that case, I can just respond bad request. And when I'm offline, I can just throw IO exception. It's pretty
Okay.
simple, like much simpler compared to retrofit implementation if I had to do, for example. And yeah, you wanted to ask something?
If the JSON is bigger, and how you convert data into domain model quickly?
Yeah, so here it is
Extension
like the,
function.
yeah, go ahead.
If we try to make extension function, then it will take a lot of time to convert data into domain model. And if it contains nested list, then it will also very much difficult for like create the extension function.
I agree. It really depends on the JSON response. But I think what you can do here is you can leverage builders to create the types, and then you don't have to fill out everything, like only the important data. And in that sense, yeah, the extension function will have to be there, but you don't have to map everything. So it's gonna be okay. So here, for example, if you take a look, how I construct the JSON, I encode to string whatever the
Yeah.
artwork is, and then I first convert the artwork to entity, which is like how the entity would
Domain.
look like in the JSON format, and then make JSON out of it, and then return it back. So this is gonna how the JSON is gonna be looking like. But the entities here is like I basically have this mapper that converts artwork to an object, which is the entity basically, the serializable. And here, like the mapping is one to one, like ID to ID, object number to object number, title to title. However, I'm not passing all the data, so this could be cumbersome. I do agree. This could be. I don't know. Maybe there are some frameworks like Spark, if I'm not mistaken, that are maybe handy in this situation. I usually do this manually. I've been working on big responses, so it's not something that you would be doing too often. But I agree. I completely agree with the argument. So this could be a bit of work, but I mean, in my opinion, totally worth it. Go ahead.
Yeah, not regarding this. Actually, did you write previews for your compose screens?
Oh yeah. Also, there was also a question about the previews. So let's actually look into the UI layer as well a little bit. So basically, what I have done here is I have in the UI, they also like didn't ask, but I explicitly said like if this was a modularized setup, I would have common module where I'm gonna keep my theme and common composables, and then separate feature modules for the artworks, which is the list and the details. Now, what was the question? So I can go
I,
into that.
I was
The
asking
Oh,
about
previews.
the
previews.
previews. So here I have some previews. And this is for the list. So I have few situations. One is the loading. So it simply shows the shimmer here. One is when the data is loaded. Those are images. And for the images, I could have created different preview for the tests. For the previews, I could have created different painter. So it could have been just a color or a separate brush or whatever, but just separate painter for the previews. I could have done that. I didn't. That's one. And then I have previews for what happens when I have bad response, like backend error, and what happens when I'm offline. So I wrote all these previews, and also I have created separate functions for that. One, two, like 4 functions basically. And they ask me how you could have done this differently, or if there is any other way, which there is. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it could be done via preview parameters, so we can reduce this multiple methods.
Yes, yeah, and exactly my answer. So I said, like, yeah, I could have used a preview parameter provider, and I could basically have one preview function, or like less than all these, to have previews for what I was aiming to. However, I'm not sure how that works because I don't have that experience, and I admitted that I haven't tried that. I don't know how that's gonna work with screenshot tests. So like if I have these parameters and if I want to have screenshot tests, I don't know how that's gonna work. So that's why I decided to go this way. Do you know how that's gonna work, Shafak?
Yeah, it takes the default for each when you create the preview parameters. So it takes the each parameter names and concat with that screenshot name, test name, and sometimes it gets so bigger and it's becomes a issue actually with paparazzi.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose you have 6 parameters, so all parameters will be concatenated with that method name of the screenshot test.
Okay.
So it looks quite ugly in that case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah, go ahead, man. Channel was first, I guess.
Yeah, but I canceled it because I'm not sure if I heard the question correctly. But I was just going to add that based on what Sergio taught us, it's also discouraged to parameterize the previews so much. Like it's okay to just copy yourself and to have them completely separately these states. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that depends what you're optimizing for. Like maintenance wise, probably you're gonna have more to maintain this way. But then, what are the benefits? So you have to like figure out probably together with the team.
Yeah, maybe.
Needers, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so my question is, it is a possible to test preview functionality?
Yeah, so that's pretty much what we are talking about here. Is the like you can use screenshot tests. So
Screenshot test.
yeah,
So why this test is need to the developer? Screenshot test. Why need?
yeah. So we need screenshot tests. Like what we can achieve with the screenshot tests is pretty much pixel perfection. So what the screenshot tests are allowing us to do is we can take like when you run the test, it takes this composable, let's say this one, or I don't know, maybe this one. It's simpler. It's loading through. So these two, and it will take images out of those two. So real images, PNG. Then when we run verification, it will make sure that that composable, it makes during the runtime new screenshot and it compares it with this one. And then it checks if the images are matching. If they are not matching, it's going to show you the difference. This part here doesn't match. So over time, when you are developing something or changing the UI, by having a screenshot test, you have an indicator if you change something unintentionally, like you move the button to the right or to the left or top bottom, doesn't matter. You cannot achieve this with, let's say, the standard interaction tests. Let's call them espresso tests. What they are okay with is like interactions indeed. So like you can say, assert that this button is present on the screen and click on that button and then assert that this other text field is appearing on the screen. But you cannot make sure where on the screen it is appearing or whether it is appearing correctly. So that's why both of these tests are important. And they work together basically, it's not one or other. So if you have screenshot tests and these interaction tests, basically you are better. Does it make sense?
Okay, got you. Like espresso test,
Yeah, the
like in
espresso test
XML.
cannot verify pixel perfection. It can verify interactions.
So,
Like in
so
XML layout, we are testing UI. I mean, for UI, UI testing, we are using the espresso test.
Yeah, for
So
interactions.
interaction, I didn't understand about interaction.
Interaction is when you like say, okay, click on this button and expect this to happen.
Oh, click the button and change the color, like button color or
no, what you want to say is
Hmm.
real user experience means
Yeah,
if I click on the button, so the button behavior will be how it will go to next screen or previous screen.
yeah,
all right, got you.
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, you cannot verify if, for example, the button is on precise position. If it's on the
Okay.
screen, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
There,
that's why. Yeah.
I actually don't have idea about screenshot test. So we are comparing these screenshots with real screenshots, or like we are watching Figma and comparing side by side.
The screenshot tests are gonna take this composable, so basically this one, and it's gonna take a picture,
Yeah.
like it's gonna create a picture out of this. Then when you run them, it takes the same composable and it creates a picture in the
Okay.
runtime and compares it to this, which was created initially.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we have an example of this. So if Abi, if you look into, let me show you. So this other application, Android Devs, not that one. Yeah, this repository. So if you go to sorry, in the feature login to the tests, there is this login test. You can see how screenshot test is written. Oh, no, wait, login screenshot test.
Login
Um,
screen, sir.
yeah, I commented this out. I believe in the previous co-working session because it was taking so much time to run the tests. So the screenshot
Okay.
tests are taking maybe a second or something, and I didn't like that. So I commented out, and apparently I ended up pushing this. So this is a mistake. But basically, what you do is you define paparazzi rule, and you can use that rule to do a snapshot. So you just call paparazzi.snapshot and then call the team and the composable that you wanna make a screenshot of. So then you run one command that will create the screenshots. And for running the test, you run another command that are making the comparisons. And I think you can find lots of, like if you go to the free community, Android devs, I think here in the classroom we mentioned in Jetpack Compose, there are resources about screenshot tests, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, Screenshot. Yeah, this. So compose test. Yeah. So if you take a look at
Yeah.
this, it explains everything, I think. Shafak, go ahead.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, have you tried the Android SDK one screenshot test?
I did not,
Okay.
but I think there was, yeah, few sessions back we had Sergio invited, and he was talking about this, and he made
Mhm.
really nice comparisons between all the available tools that we can use. So Paparazzi, the actual the thing that comes from Android SDK, and Roborazzi.
Robert.
So he makes a nice comparison. You can find it if you go here and search for, yeah, here it is. So the whole talk
Okay.
available in the free.
Yeah, I will look into it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So yeah, that's all that I got for today. That was the migration to Ktor, and how did I answer some of the questions, and maybe provided some tips to you today in terms of, like, if you end up in an interview, how you would, like, what to pay attention to, especially when working on the exercise, and how to answer specific questions. Hopefully it was useful.